Hello and welcome back to Down the Forest Path, a seasonal knitting podcast. The new year here started with a lot of rain, and while we really needed that rain because the last summer was quite dry, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, and now a lot of cities are struggling with a little bit of flooding, and it's just really not nice to be out and about at the moment that much. So while it is a little bit frustrating since I'd just been stuck indoors with COVID for a few weeks, it allowed me to sit down and reflect a bit on what I knit and made in the last year and what I want to achieve in the new year. So I thought I would share a little bit of my knitting projects of 2023 with you and give you my honest thoughts and opinions. So I've introduced a little rating system, and while you can see that overall, you'll be able to see that I kind of rated stuff quite nicely because I was genuinely quite happy with the projects I picked last year and the yarns and the patterns. There will also be a little bit of criticism in there, here and there. So without further ado, I would say let's just get started. So let's start by introducing you to the pile. Here you go. As it's clearly visible, I'm not the most super productive knitter ever. Whoopsie! There is one project in there that I can't show you yet that I still finished last year, but anyway, this video might be a little bit shorter than the other What I Knit This Year videos you might find on YouTube, but I'm still quite proud of it because there's a few quite big lace shawls in there, and I would say let's get into it. So the first project of the year I was actually super happy with, and this is it. This is the Morningstar shawl by Boo Knits, and it's a huge lace shawl, and it has this gorgeous edge as well, and I feel like it looks like wings. And that makes sense because I guess Morningstar is a reference to like the fallen angel Lucifer, as far as I understood. So this is kind of this feathery look that it has, and I'm super happy with this. Actually, I am still very, very proud of it, and as you can see in my rating, let me open it up again. Yeah, I am overall super happy with this project and the pattern because it was extremely clear, and I'm also very happy with the yarn I picked here. It is Mondschaf yarn. I don't remember which yarn quality it was, but the colorway I think was called Raven, and you can see it does look like raven feathers because it has these blue green hues in it as well, so it's not the plain black. And I'm also quite proud because it's the first time I've knit lace in an almost black color, and I always hear how extremely horrible that is, but I actually didn't find it that hard. So for anyone who's thinking about it, it's honestly not as bad as people say, I think. Give it a go. If you want a black lace shawl, then go for it. I have to say I wear this less than I hoped because I find it's almost a little bit too big for me. I'm very short, and this shawl was, I think, almost 700 meters of yarn. Usually the ones I make for myself are more in the 400 to 500 meter range, and I feel like if I don't drape it very intentionally, I look like I'm drowning a little bit in it. So it's not the best shawl for me to wear around when I know I'm going to take it off and put it back on multiple times and things like that. So for special events, yes, but just as a normal shawl to wear, it very rarely comes out, but it doesn't change the fact that this is one of the projects that I am absolutely super proud of this year. The next project I finished just in time for spring were these spring mittens. These are color work mittens that are knit in the classic like Zelbu method, so they're pointed at the top of them. And this is a free pattern on Ravelry, and originally it's a 3-color color work pattern. So the centers of the flowers are made in yellow, but I opted to use beads instead because I was a bit too lazy to do 3 color work that many times in one project, because obviously every flower center has a few rows that are made in the other color. So I beaded the centers instead with gold beads, and I think that came out quite nicely. And if you're curious about how I did it, then I actually talked about it more in another podcast episode. I'm going to link it below to make it easier for you to also do this if you're curious. I am quite happy with how these came out. I feel like my tension could have been a little bit better. I don't know if you can see, but I feel like there's a few kind of gapy areas. You have to carry floats quite a bit here and there, and I feel like I wasn't super careful with not carrying the floats. So the floats are in color work the kind of strands that happen on the inside where you don't use the second color, and you're not supposed to always tie them over in the exact same spot every row, because that can make the other color kind of poke through a bit or cause tension issues. And I feel back then I wasn't super careful and not as careful as I could have been with it. So that's one point down from the project rating here. Also, the pattern was super great for a free pattern. I would really recommend it. It's not quite as hand-holdy as some of the basic mitten patterns can be, but it's also not trying to be. So if you maybe already have a little bit experience with mitten knitting, then I would look at it and give it a go. The yarn, I think it's really good. This is the Drops Merino yarn, and I think for the price, it's like I'm kind of also thinking about the price of the yarns. For the price, it's excellent. Like, you will barely find a better one for that price. That's 100% merino, but it does have some smaller issues. Like, for example, it pills a little bit. I haven't worn these super much, just based on the fact that it got quite warm after I finished them quite quickly, which was a surprise because I think I finished them in February or early March. So I didn't get the opportunity that much. I will this winter and I'm looking forward to it. But for the price, you won't find a better yarn for this, I think, and it suits the projects really nicely. But even though I hadn't worn it that many times, you can see it already has a little bit of pilling here and there. And knitting with it also, yeah, was okay, but it can be a little bit splitty, and I find like it thins quite a bit when you pull it even just a tiny bit, and then it's not so bouncy that it comes back completely. But yes, these are the spring mittens, and I'm really looking forward to wearing these more this winter because I think they're so cute, and I'm still very proud of them. And we keep going with my Lily of the Valley mittens. So this was a free basic mitten pattern on Ravelry, fingerless mitten pattern on Ravelry. I don't fully remember which one it was, but I'll try to find out and then I'll link it for you below. And I used that pattern as the basis and then embroidered on the finished product. I am semi-happy with this, I have to say. I think the embroidery is fine, but there are some things that I would now do differently. I read up a bit more about embroidery on knitting this year, and I think I wouldn't have used cotton threads to embroider this because it's what I did. I have quite a lot of experience with embroidery in general, but embroidery on knits is something that I'm still relatively new to. I'm also not super happy with the halo on these. I feel like it looks a bit like I have hairy arms. But still, I do wear them. They're practical. They're always in my rucksack when I'm hiking. And I'm also happy with the little beads I put. They're glow in the dark, so that's quite a cute effect. And I'm still very happy with the little flower heads on the project. As you can see, the little Lily of the Valley heads. So yeah, I think now I would use a wool thread for the embroidery if I could, and yeah, just make sure it's centered a little bit better. I think I could have done that. Like, now I have to kind of readjust the mittens a little bit so that it looks super central. So I think this is still a pretty product. I'm not unhappy with it per se, but there are a few things that now I know better kind of bother me. Still, it's used a lot and they're very loved. So overall, it was still a nice project. Now let's talk about the next project, which I don't have with me because I gave it to my mother for Easter, and that is the Good Bunny. So the Good Bunny is this gorgeous little stuffed animal pattern, and I was absolutely convinced of this pattern. This was basically the first stuffed animal I ever knit, and the pattern was so clear that it really wasn't difficult at all to do it. It was a little bit fiddly because you're using a lot of small double pointed needles to do stuff and then transferring stitches here and there, but it was super clear. And if you're looking for a stuffed animal pattern that works super well, then I would fully recommend the pattern here. I still subtracted a bit of points from this project because I feel like I made a bad choice on the yarn here. I chose Drops Alpaca because it looks super cute and used it single, and I should have picked a different yarn. I think I should have picked a more rustic yarn, a little bit of a thicker yarn, or used even smaller needles, which was basically impossible because, as you can see, the knitting is a little bit gapey here and there, and that's not like the pattern doesn't say you have to knit at a super tight gauge, but I think I prefer that for stuffed animals, that they look really like sturdy and kind of tightly knit so that you can almost not recognize the individual stitches, and that's not the effect I achieved here. I still love this bunny, but I think now I would make different yarn choices. I also kind of fell a bit out of love with Drops Alpaca. I still think it has its time and place, but I noticed just how much it hairs on your clothes. I have a few scarves I wove from it and they just constantly kind of shed. I'm still going to use the rest of my Drops Alpaca up, and I think it has a really good place in the market as a low price alpaca yarn, which is really rare. It's still a yarn I would recommend for beginner knitters as well, but I should have picked a different yarn here. Also seeing that alpaca grows quite a lot when blocked. I only steam blocked the bunny, I didn't block it in water, but still I feel like I would have preferred a look that's a bit more tidy in a way, sturdy, rustic. I think you get what I mean. The next finished object is also not here because it's also with my mum, because it was her Mother's Day shawl for 2023, and that is the Cathedral Grove shawl by Romi Hill. I am overall really happy with how this project came out. The pattern is super clear. It was my first 2-color lace shawl, and I really loved this effect where the colors kind of change into each other, where you change into the border, where it has this kind of like overlapping effect where it looks like you're kind of using both colors. It's really nice. I am super happy with how well you can see the lace. I'm really happy with the colors as well that I picked here. I had to reorder yarn for it because I think it was a problem with my display. The first contrast color I had picked was a little bit too low in contrast. The beige I picked was a bit too grey looking, so I still have 2 little balls of knitting for olive silk because that was the yarn here. And I have to say that I kind of cursed a little bit looking at the yarn here and there during this project. Silk can always be a little bit finicky to work with, that is to be expected completely. With this yarn, I feel like it was sometimes, I don't know, it's weird, it felt like it was kind of like sucking the moisture from my hands somehow. It felt very kind of dry and a little bit not as smooth as normal silk, which is to be expected because it is the cruelty-free silk that they use. So the little caterpillars get to hatch, and that means that the cocoon is broken and the silk is a bit rougher because it has these interruptions in the fiber, and it's also not as high sheen as normal silk. So while I think this yarn is a really good yarn, and for example, I think there's a podcaster who made their wedding dress out of it, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. For me, for this project, I was getting a little bit fed up with it after a while, also because it can be a tiny bit splitty here and there. So I felt like I had to concentrate on it quite a lot. I would still use this yarn again, and I will, because I still have the 2 leftover balls, but I don't know if I would necessarily pick it over other silk yarns or other knitting for olive yarns that they offer, because some of them are absolutely amazing. The next finished project I am wearing right now, and that is the Sommer Ella Soho sweater by Lene Holme Samsøe. And this is one of my favorite projects that I've finished this year. The yarn is Drops Muscat, which is an extremely cheap cotton yarn that has very high sheen. It's quite shiny, and this was an absolute lifesaver on my trip to Scotland, where it was sometimes quite windy, but still warm. It really protected me against the wind. It doesn't make you too hot. This felt like the perfect yarn for a summer sweater. I am also really happy with the pattern, which is also clear because it's the second one of these that I have made. And I think there's always, like, whenever I do sweaters, I feel like there's something I could do better. So in this case, I think I was a little bit thinking I could have done probably the waist shaping a tiny bit better, but still, I think this came out super nice. I'm very happy with it. There's not much more to be said about it than just look at this. If you're making it, I don't know, depending on how you feel, I tend to have to wear a little tank top under it, because for me the lace goes quite far down and it can be a little bit see-through, but that is not a contra point for it at all, because it is my summer sweater, so I'm often kind of throwing it over in cool evenings and stuff like that anyway, so that's just perfect as it is. The next project is Woven, and it was my Scottish yarn shawl with the yarn I brought back from the hand spinner having fun on the Isle of Skye, and I'm still adoring the look of this. I hang it up on my wall quite often just so I can look at it. It's just a beautiful memory of my Scotland trip. The yarn I used in the warp, because it needed to be a bit more sturdy, was Morningstar Cassiopeia, I think, which has a bit of silk in it, and it makes it so shiny and so soft. And then the yarn I used for the weft had these little peridot color undertones. So this is just such a nice little scarf, and I'm super happy with it. It doesn't have a pattern because I just kind of made it up on my loom, as you do, because that's quite simple, just plain weave. But yeah, super happy with this. Next project we have is another Ranunculus, and it's made from Drop Spell, so that's another summer yarn, and it's another summer project that I made. I am semi-happy with this, I have to say. I picked the perfect yarn because Drop Spell is also like a really cheap summer yarn that I can fully recommend to people. It has linen in it, and it's super soft, it washes very nicely, and it dries very easily as well. I feel like I made this just too boxy. I should have just gone down one more needle size. As you know, the Ranunculus is probably no, because it's everywhere. The Ranunculus is this kind of like one size pattern that is meant to be oversized, but I felt like this one on me just looks a little bit unflattering, like I'm a child wearing my dad's sweater or something like that. And I also have to say, and this might be my most controversial opinion in this video, I'm not a huge fan of the Ranunculus pattern, even though I keep knitting it up, I feel like there are some parts in it that are a little bit confusing for unexperienced knitters, and I always see it recommended to people as a starter sweater and starting to get into like lace yokes or something like that. But I feel like for that there are patterns that use simpler stitches and are easier to follow. Like for example, the Sommer Ella Solo I would probably recommend to people wanting to knit their first lace sweater more. So yeah, that wasn't my favorite project of the year. I still wore it quite a lot because it's quite practical. But yeah, next time I'll use a smaller needle size for this, for sure. Then we have my pride and joy, the Kuutar tee. 5 stars everywhere. I'm so proud of this. This came out so prettily. It fits me perfectly. It sits on me like a dream. I can wear it everywhere I want to wear it to. Basically, you can dress it up or down. I am smitten with this. It's my favorite yarn discovery of the year as well. The Camarose Lufthansa 100% linen, the perfect summer sweater or tee. It has like semi-length arms. Just absolutely gorgeous and absolutely happy with this. There's not much more to say about it. It's just perfection. The next project is the Argyle Birch hat. I made it for my little sister. I'm quite happy with the project and how it came out. I'm really happy with the color choices I made here. I feel like the birds really stand out. The pattern is really good and really clear. I will just say, if you knit this, do a gauge swatch or just assume that it will come out too big, because looking at the project gallery, it seems like a lot of people had issues because it looks like the designer's gauge is quite tight, so a lot of people ended up with hats that are quite big on them. So in my case, I used a smaller needle size and a thinner yarn, and it was then fitting quite well, but still on the loose side of fitting quite well. So I would say, if you do this, please make sure you do a gauge swatch or go down a needle size for sure, or look at the project gallery to see how the projects turn out, because you don't want to end up with a huge hat. That's just speaking from recent experience, a little bit of a disappointment if you can't make it then into something else, which in my case I fortunately could. So the yarn I used was Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino. I'm okay with it. It's nothing to write home about for me. So it's a nice yarn, it's decent, but it doesn't, in that price range that it's in, fully stand out to me in any special way. And then we have a very small project, a tiny pumpkin I recently made for my mom as decoration. What's not to love about this? It's a 5-star pattern. It's free, it's on YouTube, it's by 100 Acre Wool podcast. You can easily find it. It's super simple. It's great to follow. She describes it super thoroughly. You won't have any issues with this pattern. So come the next autumn, make sure you knit some tiny pumpkins. It came out super cute with the little cinnamon as the stem for it. The yarn, I have to say I really like this yarn. This is Neon by Wild Atlantic Yarns in the DK strength. So it's a half silk, half merino, I think, yarn, but it pills a lot. I noticed this on my sweater as well that I made with it. And even when knitting it up as someone who can have a little bit of like sweaty hands, that's enough to make it pill a bit and shed a bit. So for me, that's a bit of a contrapoint, but if you have very dry hands, then you might actually not struggle with this at all. So that only made me take 1 star off. It's still a beautiful shiny yarn, and the silk really comes out in it, and it's incredibly soft. So yeah, have a look at it for sure. Then we have the Practical Magic shawl. I don't want to talk about this for too long because I went at length into depth with it in my last episode where I talked about it. I'm really happy with how it came out. As I said, I think I prefer knitting in fingering weight yarn, and this is lace weight. So next time I'll keep that in mind again. The pattern, this is just my personal opinion why I took a star off. It's perfectly written, definitely go for it. For me, it got a little bit tedious with all of the cables in the body of the shawl. But seriously, like if you're a bit more patient than me, go for it for sure. It's amazingly clearly written, and it's a really good pattern to follow for beginner knitters as well. So here you can see it again in all its glory. I wear this a lot. I get a lot of compliments on it. I'm happy with how this came out. The yarn, I mean, I've talked about it so much, as the dye for yarn merino silk yak yarn that they do. It's my favorite. It's just absolutely perfect for shawl knitting and lace knitting. So yeah, I think they have worldwide free shipping if I remember correctly, but I might be wrong. But they're on Etsy if you want to have a look at their stuff. They go by Dye for Yarn and Dye for Wool. They have 2 separate Etsy shops, and I can just fully recommend their stuff. It's amazing. It's a bit on the pricier side, but rightfully so for the quality that you get as well. Then we have the December bow by Petite Knit. I also just recently talked about this quite a lot. The pattern, great, clear, easy to follow, as I said in my last podcast episode. And the yarn, I feel like I have some points of a little bit of criticism with Knitting for Olive, their silk merino, and with Knitting for Olive, the normal merino wool yarn that they do. The silk mohair, it is. Silk mohair and the merino yarn. Individually, I'm like, that's not my favorite. But if you hold them together, magic happens. It's just such a great yarn, and it's amazing. And I just did a Knitting for Olive order just based on this knitting experience, and I'm going to talk about it in my next podcast episode. So if you like unboxings and yarn hauls, then make sure you subscribe to this channel, because that will be there soon. So that was a really great knitting experience, and I feel like I could have done some things a tiny bit better with how I executed the project, so that's the 1 star off. But overall, this was a very nice way to finish the year, apart from the one project that's still outstanding. And that is a woven shawl I made for my mom. That was a super nice way to finish it the whole year. It's a 5 stars everywhere project for me. It's great. The yarn is the Alice Darmo yarn. It's Virtual Yarns, her website, where you can get it. It's such a nice rustic yarn, and it works so well for weaving. I've rarely woven with non-superwash yarns, and I think from now on I'll basically always just weave with non-superwash yarns. It's so much easier. The finished project looks so much better. It looks really professional. I had a super nice experience making it. I kind of like walked it properly, watching old YouTube videos, showing videos from the 40s and 20s, how people did it, and I followed along, and I'm so grateful it came out that well. And my mom really loves it as well, that's just the best feeling, isn't it, when you give your projects away and people actually fully appreciate them. So yes, I am amazed with how well this came out, and I'm just really super happy with it. So that's it from my side, and I hope you enjoyed this a little bit different video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and also let me know what was your favorite project that you knit in the last year, because I'm curious about what patterns you did, and maybe I'll find a little bit of inspiration here and there for me. I also have 2 New Year's resolutions for my knitting, which is use Ravelry more, because it was quite difficult in the end to find out what I actually did this year, to scroll through my camera roll. So really I should have used Ravelry way more, and B, get more into embroidery on knitting, because I got this amazing, beautiful book from my mom for Christmas that talks about that, and I'm really happy about it, and I will try it out way more. So yes, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you soon for the next episode. Bye!